The weight loss that people are experiencing while using GLP-1 medications has been quite impressive. We have some studies that have shown that people using Ozempic have an average weight loss of 15%, while Mounjaro users have seen an average weight loss of 21%. And so to put that simply, if you weighed 100 kgs, that is a loss of 15 to 21 kgs, depending on which GLP-1 you are using. Now, this weight loss doesn't happen overnight, of course. These results take about 1.5 years to achieve, but it is really significant weight loss. What we do need to keep in mind, though, is that not all of this weight loss will be fat loss. Weight loss does not equal fat loss. And so if you have lost, let's just say, for example, you've lost 5 kgs, it's not going to be 5 kgs of pure fat loss. It's actually a combination of fat loss, muscle loss, some water, and also actually some bone. And if you aren't really paying attention to that, then you may end up losing more muscle and bone than you need to. Muscle loss is the last thing that we want out of weight loss, because if you lose too much muscle, then you may end up with sarcopenic obesity, which is when you may weigh less, but your body fat percentage has actually gone up because you've lost more muscle rather than fat. And so the health risks, unfortunately, still remain in that situation. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what you can do to make sure that the majority of weight loss is coming from fat loss. What we want to do is minimize muscle and bone loss. And the good news is there are ways to achieve that. So let's go. We know that GLP-1s make it easier to eat less, and that's a big reason that the weight loss does come along. But what this ends up doing is putting people in a calorie deficit where they aren't taking in enough energy to fuel the body's day-to-day processes, and your body needs this energy. So if it's not coming in through food, it will start to break down some storage forms of energy to supply itself. Where is this storage? Well, it's either going to come from glycogen, from muscle, or it's going to come from fat. Glycogen gives you glucose, which is the body's preferred form of energy. And so this glycogen actually ends up being the first to go. Most weight loss in the first few days comes from glycogen stores being used up, but then we start to move on to the longer term stores, which are your muscle and your fat. The GLP-1 medications, they don't tell your body to use the fat specifically. Your body will use whatever it can, so we want to push it towards fat. Muscle loss is an issue because less muscle means less strength. Lifting things becomes harder, balance becomes harder, and as you get older, these are the differences between independence or loss of independence, so it does become very important later on the track. What I want everyone to keep in mind as well is that the more muscle you lose during weight loss, the easier weight gain will be later on. And that's because muscle actually uses up a fair amount of energy in maintaining itself. Muscle is known as a glucose sink, and it's called that because it uses up blood sugar for energy. And so if you have less muscle, you increase your risk of experiencing blood sugar issues later on the track. So that's what GLP-1s do to muscle, but I am also going to be talking about bone in this video, and that's because as you lose weight, your bones, they have less of a load on them. And the more weight that you place on bone, the more the bone has to actually adapt and get stronger. Last video, I also talked about how you eat less food and then you get risks of nutrient deficiencies. Calcium and protein are important for bone development and maintenance. With bone health in particular, there's groups of people where it's a bit more of a concern. Now, it is mainly older adults, particularly your postmenopausal women. And if you are someone who already has osteoporosis, then this becomes more of an issue. So what can you do? Well, it all comes down to two main things: food and movement. Now, I did talk about food in the last video, but what I didn't talk about was protein. And that's because protein is the key to maintaining muscle mass during weight loss. You need to make sure you are having enough protein, otherwise your body will start to lose more muscle. And this is particularly hard for people using a GLP-1 because protein can be quite filling and getting the daily protein target definitely becomes challenging. And so for GLP-1 users, the protein recommendations are usually 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight. So if you use your current body weight, the protein number ends up being impossibly high. Now there are a few online calculators that you can use to work out your ideal body weight. I will put some links in the description and some examples should be coming up on the screen now. So as an example, let's say that my ideal body weight is 80 kilos. Then if I follow this 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram rule, then I'll need anywhere between 96 to 128 grams of protein per day. The thing is though, you can't eat all of that in one sitting. Your body won't be able to process it. The maximum amount of protein that you want in any meal is 30 grams. Because above that, you're sort of wasting the protein because your body won't be able to process it as well. So ideally, with each meal or snack, you're trying to get 20 to 30 grams of protein, which honestly is still difficult when you have a reduced appetite. But on the screen now, I'll just put some examples of where you can get 30 grams of protein and what that might look like. So 110 grams of chicken breast, for example. There's salmon and eggs, which are good options. So is tofu if you can't or don't want to eat meat. And of course, protein powders are an option if you are struggling, but you don't want to rely purely on them, and I really wouldn't suggest having them more than once per day. And I know for many of you, even these servings that I'm showing, they'll be hard. But what I'm doing is I'm showing these 30-gram examples so that you can play around with that. Maybe half of these servings, because that still gets you 15 grams. And when you are eating your food, I would suggest starting with the protein that's on your plate first. And this is so you can get at least as much as you can. And whenever you are having your meal, just ask yourself, where is the protein on this plate? Now, I am just super curious in general to see how people are going with this and how they are experiencing or feeling about getting enough protein. Are you achieving it? Are you not? What protein sources do you find the best? It might be a good idea to actually share it with each other in the comments and give each other some tips. I personally, I don't know what it's like to be on a GLP-1, so I need to learn from you guys. Now, with bones, protein is still important, but there are some nutrients that you need alongside protein, and they are calcium and vitamin D. Now, the good news about vitamin D is that you can get that from sun exposure. But I would suggest getting a blood test to see if you are deficient, and if you are, it is fairly easy to fix that with a supplement. Calcium, that one, it does come from food, though I did mention in the previous video that fortified foods can be really beneficial here. So milks or yogurts sometimes can be calcium fortified, which means they have extra calcium in them. And these are good options if you need to get more calcium into your diet. Also, again, if your appetite is reduced and you can't quite have as much calcium containing foods as you would need. If you are an older adult, which is over 65 years old, and also you're in that group of people who are at increased risk of bone issues, then a calcium supplement is very likely going to be needed if you aren't already on one. So I've just covered a bunch of information regarding food. Now it's time to go on to movement, because this is the other half of maintaining your muscle and bone, and it is honestly just as important as your nutrients. So basically, resistance training is your best friend here. This is what's going to protect your muscle mass or preserve it. And this is because resistance, which means weights, bands, or even simply body weight, it tells your body that you need muscle, so you need to keep it. Use it or lose it, as they say. Now, if you aren't using and pushing your muscles to grow, your body will start to sacrifice it because it thinks it's not needed. We also want to make sure that there is progression over time, meaning that you adapt to the weight, you then increase it, or you do more reps. You need to be pushing yourself in some way because this helps muscle grow. And in this case, your body will prioritize muscle mass, and instead it will start to burn more fat. So what does that look like in reality? Ideally, it means aiming for 2 to 3 sessions per week of resistance training. This is going to look different for everyone depending on your own physical capabilities and your own history with resistance training. You could be someone who has maybe never lifted a weight before, or maybe you were already training before the GLP-1 started. It's really going to depend where you are. So if you are a beginner, maybe you start with 1 to 2 sessions a week instead, and you just do body weight exercises. It doesn't matter. It's not about how heavy you're lifting. It's just about consistency and giving your own individual body a slight challenge. You also need to really pick something that you enjoy doing. So if you like gym-based exercises, then what I mentioned before, like weights, bands, or bodyweight exercises, they're going to be okay. But other people may enjoy other activities. Maybe you prefer to be in a pool. Maybe you can do team sports like basketball. And look, you may not yet be in a position where you can be moving that much. In that case, just start with a walk. Get moving first, then build up to weight. It's a good idea if you're completely new or if you're stuck on ideas to see a personal trainer who can assess your baseline and give you your workouts based on that. But you do really need to use your muscles if you want to make sure you're preserving them during that weight loss and maximizing the fat that you lose instead. If you do want some exercises that you can do with weights, bands, or body weight, let me know in the comments. If I start putting them in this video, it starts to get too long, but I can make something separate if you want some example workouts. It is going to be difficult at the start, but trust me, it does get easier. You may even start to enjoy it. Don't go excessively into working out though, especially if you're not used to it. Build that foundation and then you work up from there because it reduces any risk of injury. Now, the good news is that resistance training is also going to be very good for your bone health, and it's recommended to protect bones too. So you're hitting two birds with one stone here. I haven't talked about cardio yet, and that's actually still important. You don't want to ignore that. It doesn't do as well for protecting your muscles, but it is part of a well-balanced exercise routine. It's good for your heart, your brain, blood sugar. If you want to be healthier, then cardio is just as important. Now, the goal with cardio, it is 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. So it can be a bit tricky fitting this in, and also 2 to 3 sessions a week of resistance training. Just do what you can first. That's going to be enough. Work your way up to both. If you're on the GLP-1, I would probably prioritize the resistance training just to protect your muscle, and then you can work your way up to cardio and getting more of that in. So that's pretty much what I think you should know when it comes to making sure you're doing as much as you can to minimize the amount of muscle that is lost when you experience the weight loss while on GLP-1s. This information, it isn't just specific to GLP-1s though, it is actually just for weight loss in general. Next video, I will talk about how to prevent weight regain with GLP-1s, because many people are finding that a significant amount of weight that was lost, it does return once the GLP-1 has stopped. So we'll go through how to deal with that, what you can do. Don't forget, this video is part of a larger series that I've done to help people make the most out of being on GLP-1 medications. Click here to watch the rest of the series if you've missed them. But I will see you in the next video, and until then, keep playing the long game.